Hello, and welcome back to Inspire the Podcast with myself, Nicola Wills. Our incredible guest today is a lady whose voice and wisdom is unfortunately very much needed in the world right now. Her best-selling book, Unbroken, is a personal memoir of a horrific ordeal no child should ever face. Being gang raped at 13 and then raped 3 more times before the age of 18. After many years of shame, stigma and silence, in 2014, aged 49, she shared her story for the first time and realized that she was a victim of crime. Now she has found her voice and intends to use it. She is a well-renowned, amazing author with her book, Unbroken. She's now a public speaker, a podcaster, and a 2 times TEDx speaker. Please welcome Madeleine Black.
Thank you, Nicola. It's so lovely to join you. Thanks for having me on.
Hello, Madeleine. Thank you so much for being here. Now, we've heard that what happened to you age 13, and we'll go into that a little bit later in the podcast. But I would love to start with, before all this happened, when you were, just a child, what did your life look like? Where are you from? What was your relationship like with your parents? Just share with us what that little girl looked like.
Yeah, I think I was a very shy, naive little girl, really. Kind of person that hid behind their mum's legs if anybody said hello to them. I'm one of 5. I'm in the middle. I have 2 amazing parents. My father passed away about 25 years ago, but he was a Holocaust survivor, but he used his laughter. That was his strength, and he really loved life. My mum was brilliant until she became bedridden. She had her neck broken in an operation, so she was bedridden for a few years. She had weaknesses already, and they didn't take the care that they needed. So, yeah, after that, things were quite tough at home, I guess. It was a challenging time because we had people in looking after my mum, people in looking after us. My dad was juggling home and juggling 5 kids. So, yeah, it wasn't always easy, which I guess is maybe kind of led to what happened that night. I was looking for an excitement or a way from what was taking place at home.
Yeah, I can imagine. And what was it like? What were you like at school?
I was just very well behaved, I was too scared to be naughty then. Just did what I was told and, just get on with it. And I used to really, really enjoy school, enjoy seeing my friends. My mum is the kind of mum that she still does now, rescued every animal going. Oh. So our house, we had 5 kids, 5 dogs, bunnies, gerbils, guinea pigs. She would rescue birds, we had everything. She later went on to have an animal sanctuary many years later. So we're always surrounded by animals.
So wonderful. Yeah. And so then you become a teenager, age 13. And I think like all of us, it's a time where you do not know what's going on in, is this friend my best friend? You just want to be in the cool gang. What's happening to my body? And I can imagine, at that time, you very much like all of us girls, you were in that place. Can you just, talk me through that, year of your life that happened?
Yeah, I was one of these girls who literally woke up overnight and just had full massive boobs. I just developed so quickly, this massive flood of hormones. And there was this girl at school who was really, really cool and everybody wanted to be her. But my mum, we wore our sensible Clark shoes and our long navy socks. And, I guess I was a bit of a geek maybe, but it's a difficult time for anyone, so especially to have a trauma at that time in your life because it's such a confusing time anyway with all the hormones that are flying around our heads.
Yeah, so you're this young, naive girl who all of a sudden wakes up looking like a woman.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then, so take us back to that time, to that day. Was it a weekend that this happened?
It was a Saturday. So my friend that was involved, you're way younger than me, so you might not remember, there was a program called Charlie's Angels, and she had the best flicks in her hair. I was so jealous of her flicks.
Farrah Fawcett flicks.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And she wore the nicest shoes and she wore makeup. We weren't allowed to wear makeup. She was really cool, and she just suggested that we had a night out, and we did, I guess, what most people have done at some point in their teenage life. We lied about where we were staying because her mum was away and she was meant to be at her grandma's, and we just said we were both at her grandma's when we weren't. Her grandma thought she was at my house, and we managed to buy a bottle of vodka. It was the late 1970s, and I guess it was an awful lot easier then. No way to look 18, but we did. And we took it to this little cafe along the Finchley Road in North London, and obviously it didn't take very long for me to drink it, to get very sick, and after throwing up everywhere, they kicked us out.
Wow. And then, God, the Finchley Road, I know that Finchley Road so well, I lived there. And even just you saying that just makes me feel like that was just a normal cafe on a normal Saturday. Yeah. It could have been anyone. It could have been any of us girls. And that's the scary part.
And that's the part that people get in contact with me saying, oh my gosh, I was out one night and I was legless. I was really drunk. I woke up in the pavement, or I woke up in between two cars in the street. Anything could have happened to me as well. So yeah, it was just wrong time, wrong place. I don't know if they planned to rape me, but I think it was just the wrong place, wrong time.
And so whilst you were sat in the cafe, do you remember the guys that were there?
Yeah, my friend, her father was American, and they were all boys from the American school down the road in St. John's Wood. Yes, and she then changed. She became an American accent and became quite flirtatious, and I was just, still quite shy. There was quite a few of them on the table, and then as I'm being sick, two of them took us back to her mum's flat, the empty flat, and that's really when the night went horribly wrong.
Yeah. And so how old do you think these boys would have been? I mean,
They weren't much older. They may be at the top of school, so maybe like 17, 18.
But just
they were sons of diplomats.
Wow. Wow. Which, I mean, doesn't make it any worse or any better, but you just think, if your parents are well educated, surely you know better, but it's...
Yeah, but, rape is not about sex. It's about abuse and power and dehumanizing, and that's really what it's about. So it was just all about abuse and power over me. And
so you left the cafe.
Yeah.
And these boys, what you thought helped you.
Yeah, I naively thought that they were going to put me into the bed and take me out the clothes I'd chucked up all over and let me sleep it off. But actually, very quickly on, I realised, no, that's not what they're there for. They were there for something else.
And where was your friend at this time?
They put us into different bedrooms, and after it all happened, she appeared not to have been touched in any way. And readers have a lot of theories, but I don't know what's true or not, because many years later, when I was able to tell my parents, about 3 years afterwards, she denied it had happened how it had happened. She said, no, they were just nice boys and brought us home, So I don't know. I can't drive myself crazy wondering, did she set it up like some people suggest, or did anything happen to her, or I don't know. I just think I blocked it out of my mind. She blocked it out of her mind. And we were just scared we'd get into trouble because, we'd met boys, we'd lied, we went to an empty flat, we bought alcohol. So I'll never know.
Of course. And you were in this room. And can you remember it? Or, because I have 2 drinks and my memory goes. Is it a feeling that you remember? Or is it something that happened that is just a memory within your body?
Well, it's very weird memories, isn't it? Because now I remember, but at the time it was gone. I knew something had happened. I had many injuries on my body. But at the time it was very fuzzy. It was really hazy. I wasn't really aware of how I got these memories. And then gradually, this is a long time ago now, I would get flashbacks of images or things that they did to me or things that they said. It was more their attitude, their laughing at me. It wasn't even the most painful things that were the most degrading things. Things that you wouldn't imagine would actually affect you more, really affected me more. And That's what it was. It was the laughter, and just total disregard for a human being is really what impacted me, because trauma is never really about what happens to us. It's what we do with it. It's like the residue that's left behind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard you say on one of your TED Talks that you felt it was almost like an out-of-body experience.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
That you were like sat on the wardrobe, was that right? Like looking down at yourself. I mean, just talk me through how that must have... Did that happen straight away, or was that something that you can look back on and see it?
Yeah, that's as the violence escalated, as it really escalated. They made about 3 serious attempts to end my life, which obviously didn't work, thank goodness. And I think if I had stayed in my body, I don't think I would be here. You kind of have to get out of the way when there's extreme trauma. You hear of mums being able to lift a car if their toddler's been caught underneath it, or so many people have said to me they left their body at the scene of the crime, which was taking place to them. And it was very surreal. And because it was so surreal, that's what made me think, have I dreamt all of this? Because I wasn't really in when so much of it was happening. I had to get out to protect myself. And it wasn't an intentional thing. It's just the trauma took over and my mind, my body just left the scene. But it left me very confused for many years. I thought it feels so dreamlike and I couldn't quite grasp it all. And I think on one hand, it really saved me, but on the other hand, it confused me for many, many years.
Yeah, of course. And also because you're 13,
Yes.
you don't know about those kind of things anyway. So for those things to happen to you, it's not like you go, oh, that was this and he's doing this now, because you don't really even know that they exist. You're not old enough to have had the life experiences or watched movies or heard about the stories to know that these horrific people and humans can do these things. So it's
absolutely, I didn't have the words, I couldn't verbalize it. And also at the very end, one of them threatened me and said if I did speak about it, they would find me and they would kill me. And I believed him quite seriously. And it's very hard to find the words to really verbalize, because I denied it, I minimized it, and my instinct was to push it down, to push it far away from my consciousness. It wasn't even a thought, it's just really what took over, just to push it away as much as I could.
So you eventually, they didn't kill you, thank goodness. No. You would have probably fallen asleep, and then you woke up and it's the next day.
Yeah.
Have they left by then? Did they leave?
They had left. They put me back in the bed and then they left. And I woke up and my friend was now in the bed next to me, and she was still clothed and untouched, and I was naked and had a lot of injuries on my body.
And what then happened from there? From that point forward,
Yeah. We both decided really not to speak about it, because already, even though there was no social media then, late 1970s, but the victim-blaming messages were coming into me fast. I thought I'd lied to my mum and dad, I'd gone and bought alcohol, I met boys, I put makeup on, all the things that they said don't do. And I just thought, well, I kind of brought this on myself, really, hadn't I? This was my fault. And so that was the message I was giving myself, fed by society. And it's 5 million times worse now, but that's already at that age, I was buying into those myths that are out there. So we didn't speak about it.
Sorry, how did you cover up your injuries?
It's amazing what you can do. You just put your clothes back on and go back home. My mum was still bedridden at this point, so I didn't need to go into her room too much. And over time, the physical wounds heal, but it's more what it really does to your head, what it does to your mind is really where the damage was done.
Yeah, of course. And so explain then the change in you. So then as a teenager, what did your teenage years then look like? If you told no one in that whole time, it was just you and your friend.
Yeah.
And she didn't even really know or believe you either.
Yeah.
What did your life look like in your teenage years?
Depression, eating disorder, drugs, alcohol, anxieties, fears, phobias, attempted suicide, children's psychiatric ward when I was on my 14th birthday, locked in psychiatric ward, Great Ormond Street. Yeah, it was a pretty dark teenage years.
And what were your parents? Were they like saying, what's wrong with you? Like, how can you change like this?
They were. My mum reminds me that she took me to see a psychiatrist on Harley Street, but I was kind of mute. I wasn't speaking at all. And she said the psychiatrist told her that, well, if she won't speak to me, I can't help her, but I can help you. So she went along. But she said she always knew something was wrong, but they could never figure it out. And actually, when I wrote my book, I decided to ask for my notes. Somebody suggested I could get my notes from the time in hospital, because I really wanted to see, did they have any idea? And nothing in my notes suggests they knew that I'd experienced a trauma. They just put me down as a troubled adolescent with anorexic and a mother at home that was struggling with her health and well-being. And I just think, everybody was focused on my behaviour. Why was she behaving like that? Rather than asking, well, what happened to you?
What happened?
No one really ever asked me the right questions in there. Never.
Oh God, my heart, I just feel just like so sad for that. It's just so, and also it's of a time, I think if that happened right now, I would like to think that we have come so far in soul searching and trauma, that it wouldn't get missed. A naughty boy or a naughty girl or someone that's doing things that aren't typical of their behavior. It's not just because all of a sudden they've become naughty.
Absolutely.
Something has happened for this to be that way,
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't speak, I couldn't eat. I hated myself. I had, no self-worth, no self-belief, no self-confidence. And that was just put down to depressed anorexic.
Just depressed, troubled teens.
Yes, exactly.
Oh my goodness. So you then turned 18. Then talk through what then happened then.
When just before I was 17, my mum discovered I was smoking a lot of dope with my friends, and she decided to call all of my friends' parents to let them know. So clearly I wasn't too popular at school, and I would pretend to go to school. I'd go to the park most days and just sit and smoke and then come back at the end of the day. And they just said, maybe I should go away for some time, get away from the bad crowds that I was involved with. And just before 17, I went to the Middle East. I went to Israel for a year. And that's nearly 40 years ago now. And that's where I met Stephen, my husband, a Glaswegian, all that way, I met a Glaswegian. And that really, you shouldn't really look for something outside of you to cure you. But I do believe he was an angel sent to save me. He did. He's had a massive impact on my life.
Yeah, absolutely. What an angel. And were you able to tell him what had happened to you?
Not straight away, but after about 5 years, he asked me to marry him, and I just was terrified, the idea of giving birth. I thought somehow my fears were really around my safety, being out of control and being around men. And I just thought, I can't give birth. So the easiest way was just to avoid it. So I thought, right, I'll never become a mum. That's problem solved. That was the way I approached things, and just avoid them, which was not a very sensible approach. And when he asked me to marry him, I thought I'd better just remind him that, he's not going to have children with me. And he was okay. He was really okay about that. And we'd been married a couple of years. We used to take all of our holiday every year, because I should really live in Spain or Ibiza. I shouldn't be living in Glasgow. I'm meant to live in the sunshine, definitely. And we would just take all of our annual leave for about a month every winter. And we'd in Thailand, and I can just see the exact moment that I flipped that decision round. He was walking along the beach. We'd been traveling for 3-4 weeks on this gorgeous island, Koh Phi Phi. And he just wonders out loud, how about starting a family? And I was just ready to say, well, come on, you know why I can't do that. I've explained it to you, but something different came into my head. And I thought, if I don't become a mum, they've won. I'm giving all of my power and control over to them, and they won't even know about it. So I thought there and then, I've got to come up with a plan, which I call my best revenge, because they are the best things I've ever done in my life. And not only was I going to become a mum, but I was determined to live my best life, to clean up my trauma, to drain my swamp. I don't know if it's ever completely drained, but we're getting there. And I'm just going to live my life as best as I possibly could. And then I went into therapy when I came home, and 2 years later, my eldest daughter, nearly 30 years ago, was born, Anna, and I went on to have 2 more girls, Mimi and Layla.
Girls as well.
Yes. Yes. And a Jewish mama. So yeah, as well as my trauma and a Jewish mama. So yeah, it was a challenge for me to be a mum of 3 girls. It was.
Yeah, of course, especially having that in the back of your mind, like the fear that why it could be them. And I think that would probably, for me being a mum, I would rather have that all happen to me 10 times rather than it happen to them once.
But actually becoming a mum, I saw my fears. I have an example which showed me how crazy I was with my fears. When Anna was going to high school, as they say in Scotland, secondary school, she wanted to take the public bus and I refused to let her. I said, no, I'm going to drive you to school every day because that's what I've always done. And she kind of wore me down. And so I gave her bus money. I gave her a rape alarm. I told her not to listen with her earbuds in, sit nearest the driver, etc. And then for about a week, I used to drive my car behind that bus to go to school to see that she got there. And then I suddenly woke up to what I was doing. I thought, you're crazy. This is really madness. What am I doing? What has been the point of bringing these 3 girls into this world if I could corrupt their minds? I could really poison them and transfer all of my paranoid thoughts and my fears and my anxieties onto them. So I had to really learn to loosen my grip and let them be, the strong, spontaneous, independent women that I want them to be, which is kind of, be careful what you wish for because they all are. But yeah, I had to be very careful because I saw that I could corrupt their minds so easily and I didn't want to do that.
Yeah, and just squash their independence because of your fear, of course.
So I had to let them live and they have lived. And I've always been very open. I said, I don't care what you've been doing. If you've been drinking, doing drugs, you're lost, just phone us and we will always come and get you. We'll never judge you. We'll just always be there. So they know that.
Gives me goosebumps. But yeah, I completely agree. And so at this time, did people know what had happened to you? Or were you just doing these things and kind of doing them, not anyone really knowing what you're doing?
Just some people knew, but not many. But then when I had this thing with my fear, I started to see my fears aren't real. It's all based on my imagination, and I'm sure you all know the acronyms, false evidence appearing real or face everything and rise. And I realized I'd been doing the first one for years because fear, it was like my best pal. We would just walk side by side for years. Everything scared me. I mean, I did have to face a lot of fears when I became a mum, being around men and being out of control. I've had 2 home births in this house, though. That's how much I controlled the situation. But I just saw everything's based on already what's happened, which is the worst case scenario, or it's based on what could happen. So I had to find a way to stay in this moment, to stay as centered and grounded and present as possible. And that's really been my journey to allow the triggers to come up, but to sit with them and not let them rock me anymore.
Yeah, amazing. So whilst you're also becoming a mum, you were working, weren't you? Just tell us a little bit about that.
I've worked, before I trained as a psychotherapist, I worked at Women's Aid and I worked at Rape Crisis. I was a volunteer there for years as well. And then through my work at Women's Aid, I wanted to become a better support worker. And so I trained as a counsellor, went on to do psychotherapy and just fell in love with that. So I left that world and worked with both men and women. And that also caused issues because I'd get very scared in the sessions when I first worked with men. And again, I was thinking, I'm going to be a rubbish therapist if I can't work with like 50% of my clients. So again, I guess it's like exposure therapy without me knowing. I said, I only want to work with men. I asked the receptionist to not give me any more female clients, no more mixed couples. And I did for a long time. I worked with just men only. And that really, shifted my fears around men. I saw what belonged to me wasn't there fear at all in the room, and I could park it to one side in order to do, I guess, the therapeutic process with them.
Wow, how powerful. Then in 2014, you shared your story publicly.
I did.
Didn't you, for the first time? How did that come about?
Yeah, so through the powers of social media, there's an organisation called the Forgiveness Project, and their founder, an amazing woman called Marina Cantacuzino, she knew a little bit about my story because I'd started to share stuff. I'd been one of these women in papers newspapers that had her just a silhouette. It's always by a window for some reason. I don't know why. It's just, I was shaded out. I just said maybe Madeleine. I didn't have all the details. And she said she'd like to share my story on her website because she collects stories of forgiveness, because I later on chose to forgive these two men. And she said, you don't need to put your face, you don't need to put your name, you can be totally anonymous. But, I was just tired of being ashamed. Why should I be ashamed for a crime that was committed against my body, So I just thought, no, I'm going to put my face and my name and my photo. And I did. And I've never looked back, never. It was just amazing what took place.
That is just so powerful. And how was there a moment where, was it like a practice or something you did to say, I forgive you? How on earth did you get to that point?
I used to call myself an accidental forgiver. I never really, honestly, I was never going to forgive them. I just thought they were animals. And I fantasized and plotted all these crazy ideas. I wanted somebody to kidnap them, take them to a flat, tie them up, beat them up, rape and torture them for 5 hours, whatever, just like they'd done to me, so they'd understand. But it was when Anna turned 13, all of the memories returned. And I went back for therapy again, and it took about 3 years. It would come back to me in my dream states. Nightmares would wake me up, and I'd get new information. I tried to avoid going to sleep, which is not a great idea if you work in and looking after 3 children. Not my best plan ever. But about near to the end, my therapist, Ron, said to me, maybe they weren't born rapists. And at first I just thought, what a ridiculous statement to make. How could you say something so stupid? And I got really, really angry with him. But then it also, I guess, sent me on a journey of inquiry. I really wanted to understand how could they dehumanize me and degrade me so much. How can they know to be so violent? But then I realized when they're dehumanizing me, they're dehumanizing themselves. They're not connected into their goodness, their source that we all come into this world with. And somehow, don't ask me how, this is just what happened. I felt compassion in my heart because I thought, I've really done a good job of living my life as best as I can and refusing to be identified by what had happened. But the path of someone that hurts somebody else, I don't think that's easier. And I thought that's a tough path for them to walk. Whether they're conscious about it or not, it's going to leak out of them and somehow. And then I just thought, in order for me to make peace, I could choose to forgive them. And that took me by surprise. It really did. Because I was still chained to them. I was still chained to the past. Being stuck in that trauma held me back. But this also came, I have to be very clear to anyone that's listening, after years and years of talking therapies, a lot of body therapies, alternative therapies, things that people might think that's a bit wacky, but all to shift the memories that were held in my head, but also held in my body, because our bodies and our mind are so linked and we hold so much trauma in our bodies. So my journey has been about, even though I didn't want them, getting my memories back and landing back in my body. Because when I left that night, it took me a long, long time to get back into my body, if that makes sense. I felt like I was renting an empty house for years, an unfurnished property. I was just a tenant in my body. And it's taken me a long time to land back in using many different ways. So I realized that forgiveness was about me. I didn't need them to say they were sorry. It was really an act of self-love, of self-compassion, and it set me free. It's so much more peaceful, not hating and just letting it go, because it's just a story now. I'm nearly 58. It doesn't own me in any way. It is just a story, but it hugely impacted on my life, and yet I'm not the events in my life. So it's this paradox that goes around in my head a lot.
Yeah. And it's also, then you've given forgiveness. It makes you powerful to be able to share your story with people who are not yet in that place.
Yeah.
For them to go, okay, there is light at the end of this tunnel.
Absolutely.
This feeling of hate and anger that surely would just coats everything in their life.
Yeah, but I have to say, I'm not a forgiveness preacher. I don't want people to think that the only way to heal is via forgiveness. And I will never, ever, ever forgive the act of rape, because it did totally violate my mind and my body and my psyche. There's many paths to healing, and this is just the way that I chose. But it made perfect sense, because I was just holding on and holding on to the hate. And it was only harming me. They didn't have any idea. So, yeah, but I don't want to be a forgiveness preacher, but it made sense for me.
Yeah, and it's that thing of hurt people hurt people. You know, I have lots of people on here, amazing guests, have so much success, and they're just like, I was severely bullied, you know, and they have to let go of that, and they go, you know what, that person was, I actually felt sorry for them in the end.
Yeah.
Just quickly, did you ever have any... was there any charges pressed or anything against the victims? Or
no, I never took it to the police. I know that they would have lived in London for a couple of years, and they would have gone back to America once the family would have left. And it was only when I was writing my book that I even remembered the 3 other times, because I had no idea about consent. You know, I was just too scared really to say no. I became very promiscuous, which is also one of the many side effects a woman or a man can have after being raped or sexually assaulted. And I just thought, actually, those times I very clearly said no, and they just carried on. And it was like till I was 51 writing my book, went, that was rape as well, you know.
Wow.
And that's been the part that people have messaged me saying, not the main one, but the other events. Not that rape is comparable, because it's all a violation. It's not one is worse than the other. They said, yeah, that actually happened to them, and they never called it rape either.
Yeah. I just think, especially when, you know, you are a teenager, and for me, it led right up to the age of 30. You know, I've never experienced rape, but what I definitely have experienced is a feeling of, I just have to do this, even if I don't really want to, because I've got myself to this point. They're going to be angry if I don't.
And that's no consent really, is it?
That's no consent either. But, you know, it was like, well, you know, just let them on, Nicola. And gosh, having my girls now, you know, and my mum didn't really, I think as well, you know, I'm 40 now. We didn't talk about sex. It wasn't a thing. I didn't know anything about my body, their body. It was just, you know, all my friends doing it, and so we just learnt about it on the job. As awful as that sounds, there was no discussion, and something that, you know, that I definitely know that with my children, it is going to be an open book from as soon as, you know, like probably like 9, 10 is going to be a conversation, so that I know and understand. How did you, you know, as a mother, you know, raising teenage girls, what was the conversation like to them from what you have experienced? How did you deal with it?
Too open compared to most mums. They were always very aware of what had happened to me. I used, I guess, kind of age-appropriate language. So when they were little, they knew that 2 boys hurt me very badly. And that's how I used to word it. And as they got older and, you know, that became more into their consciousness, their awareness, they knew exactly what rape was.
Great.
And I was always made them very aware that you always have a choice. It has to be a very enthusiastic yes on both parts. And you can get as far as you want, and then you can still say no. That's okay as well. You're not teasing them in any way. But I think we need to teach consent and respect at school, and not just about sexual relationships. You know, as a little girl, go and kiss your granddad, go and give your granny a hug, go and sit on this one's knee, you know, forced to do things, and rather than just to be an independent person, say, I don't want to do that, you know? So there's so many areas we need to teach about respect and healthy relationships.
Yeah, and not, it is that feeling of like, especially as little girls, to be kind and be nice and be cute.
Yes. Our social mind, isn't it? We don't want to be rude, but we should be. If it doesn't feel right, trust your gut, just say no, run.
Exactly. And my little girl at 5, she has an instinct. She knows if that person isn't, you know, she doesn't feel comfortable, she doesn't want to be with him, be around, you know, him or her. And I can sense it instantly, and I pick up on it, and I'm like, it's okay, Minnie, come here, stay with me. You don't need to do anything. And so I just, I'm very, very passionate about about that. You know, a lot of my background, I worked in the nightlife industry, and it wasn't in strip clubs or anything like that, but at night, unfortunately, you would see the worst of people. And it was horrific. You know, growing up in Dorset, in this little village of Sleepy Village, I saw nothing. And I moved to London when I was 18. And then within the first 5 years of living there, I was open to...
A bit of an eye-opener.
Yeah, the world really around me. And I did feel like on the back foot and naive because I wasn't educated. And, you know, I know because I was a podium dancer, I used to dance as well in podiums. And I would have boyfriends say to me, oh, you shouldn't go out in that, Nicola, you're asking for it. You know, like, oh, it's just a bit, it's like, just a bit too sexy, you know, you're going to get just all of these conversations around, you know, I had a sexy body and therefore I should cover up if I don't want any attention, because otherwise you're going to, bad things are going to happen.
So that really is victim blaming. It's putting all the blame onto what the woman was wearing. I know now it wasn't anything to do with what I drank, what I wore, the lies I told. 100% of all rapes are caused by rapists. Nothing else. And that's just a way of avoiding responsibility, of blaming the victim, and silencing women and men from coming forward and reporting it, or speaking out about it even, because I don't know if reporting it is always so helpful, because of the so-called justice system lets down so many victims in our country. But yeah, it still goes on. Well, you know, what did you expect? You went up to his hotel room. Well, no, you didn't ask to be raped. That's not what you expected. There was in Ireland, I love the Irish people. They're very fiery, a bit like the Scots. And there was a woman who was on a trial. It was her rape trial. She was a witness in her trial. And the judge said to her, well, you were wearing lacy thongs. What did you expect? And so if he's got down to your thongs, he's obviously not, she hasn't consented to that. But all of the demonstrations in the street were women that had bought lacy thongs and were just waving them in the air. This is not an invitation to rape me. My underwear does not cause rape. Rapists cause rape. And it really angers me, because you should be able to walk down the street naked and not be touched.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you write your book age 51. You've become an author. How did that come about? Was that something that you were like, I need to write this, or were you asked to do that?
No, I thought I would never speak about my story. As I mentioned earlier, I've done a lot of, I guess, alternative therapies, and I've had a teacher of life, I guess you would call him a shaman, for many years, maybe about 20 years, a man named Imaho. And he suggested I write my story down. And I'm like, not a chance. There's no way I'm writing it for you or for anyone. But I thought maybe I could. And I stopped and started over 4 years, and eventually 12 pages came out of me. And he said, if you're going to write it, put down all the details and everything that happened. You know, don't exclude anything. And my fingers were just that automatic, and it just flowed out of me. And then he asked me if he could speak about me at one of his workshops. I went, hang on, that's a very different thing. You said you just wanted me to write it for you. And then, you know, I thought, well, I really trust this man. He has helped me a lot. And I agreed. And it was in, I think, Teufen, one of the workshops in Switzerland, where he spoke about me. And as he was speaking, I wasn't present. I was in Glasgow. I was aware of my words kind of flying around. And I thought, I think he's let them read what I'd written. And I was right. And I phoned and said, how did it go? He said, oh, it was great, really good. And I was mortified. I just thought, can't ever go back to a workshop. How could he do this to me? But then I thought, you know, it was a shame, really. It was a shame that was speaking to me, thinking that people would look at me differently as if somehow what happened was a reflection of me. And so I went back to Ireland, was the next workshop for me in Cork. And I didn't know that he told people not to speak to me, just ignore her and let her be. And the workshops run for about 4 days. And I walked in, and it was like I had walked in naked. I felt so stripped. And everybody just kind of looked down at their feet, and nobody even made eye contact. Nobody spoke to me. It was very strange. But, you know, people are people. And after a few days, they started to say, you know, I held on to this argument with a businessman, and if you can forgive those two men, I can forgive this man. Or I had a similar situation, but I've never told anyone. And then I started to see that power of sharing our stories. And then through the Forgiveness Project, after I had shared my story, I went to an event in Glasgow. They're normally always in London. There was an amazing woman called Marianne Partington who wrote a beautiful book called If I Sit Very Still. And her sister Lucy Partington had been murdered by Rose and Fred West. And when I heard her speak at this event, it was just at a school down the road, she just emanated this peace. And she spoke about her journey into prisons, how she shares her story with the Forgiveness Project. She's been doing this for like 10 years or so. And I bought her book that night, and inside she wrote, "Now you must speak." And just as soon as I read it, I thought, I'm going to write my story down. And just like when I'd written the words for Imaho, it literally just, I always say I vomited my book. It was about 8 weeks later, all the words just appeared. I would couldn't sleep at night, and I would just see all the chapter headings and all the words and sit down here at my Mac, and then in 8 weeks it was done. And I very luckily got a publisher within a few months, and the rest is history, I guess.
Wow. That's just so powerful. And it's like, it is that passing, Lucy went first, and she wrote 2 words, now you shall speak, that you read, that spoke to you, that you just read your message. How amazing. Did you write those words in your book?
One of the very last chapters is called Meeting Marion. So I speak about how I met her, and that was the trigger, the good trigger of me just opening up. And I think when we're ready, the words do come, when we allow that space and we open up, whether that's verbally or creatively or, writing, whatever. If we can just allow the space to be, it's amazing what can come up.
Yeah. And since writing your book, so much has opened up for you. So you stopped working as a psychotherapist.
I did, yes.
Was it new?
Just before lockdown, which maybe wasn't the most sensible decision at the time, but I had just been in Namibia. I was the closing keynote at a big conference. Wow. And I just thought, I can't juggle everything. I don't want to do both jobs kind of part-time, and I wanted to focus on speaking because I thought in my sessions I'm on a one-to-one, but if I'm on a stage I can do one-to-many, and I want people to see that there's definitely life after trauma. You can have an amazing life. You can really live your life well, and you can heal. And if anything, you can have post-traumatic growth. You can grow through what you go through without a doubt.
Yeah. And so that led on to TEDx, 2 TEDx's. How did you feel about doing that? I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, the first one I applied. I didn't get in the first time, so I got in on the second time. And I believe Glasgow is one of the hardest ones to get into. And it was a big audience. I'd never spoken to, I think it was 2,500 people before, and my family were present in the audience. And I have to say, honestly, it was one of the most terrifying but liberating moments of my life, because once I stood on that red dot, I just thought, well, this is me, and there's no hiding anymore. But also I thought, it's not about me anymore. It's not about me speaking. It's now about who's listening. And that really grounded me. And the second one, actually just here in this little office with everything pushed out the way, was a virtual one. And I was asked to do that one. People had seen the first one and they invited me to do another one. I was just recently invited to do another one, and I thought, I don't know what I would say now. So I'm still deciding if I do number 3 or not. But yeah, it's been really good because, again, I just really want to speak out to end that silence for other people, to allow them to find their voice, because I do think, what we don't speak about gets heavy. It weighs us down. It really does. It's heavy to carry all these dark chapters around inside of us that we never speak about. So if we can speak what's happened, doesn't have to be about rape, any trauma, it just releases something and shifts something, and then more of us can turn up, the you were before it even all happened to you.
Yeah, and you're still there. It's and that's it. It's remembering, because I'm sure you forget, and it gets buried and buried and buried until you just. It's like, who even am I? What colour do I like? What do I even think? What is my opinion? And we're not, like you said, we're all born to be here, to show up, to shine our light, to be amazing. Even those the horrible people that did what they did to you, they could heal their trauma. Potentially they could, become lights to other people.
Yeah.
And so where are you now? What is your mission? What is your purpose right now? Share with us.
Yeah, well, I feel my purpose really is to share my story, and I'm not really a very good business person. I just allow the work to come to me. Obviously, with lockdown, things changed dramatically. Everything was virtual, but more and more events are coming up. So I speak in person quite a lot. But whatever happens, I'll always speak out. I'll always be an activist now, because I was silent for years and I refuse to be silent anymore. I can't be quiet about all the injustices that I see and the injustice system, so I would always speak up. I'm a patron for a few organisations and I support them as well, but yeah, I think this is my purpose now, just to speak, to give permission to other people to find their voice as well.
Yeah, like you've lit your candle, which allows others to light theirs.
Absolutely.
And I just love that, you were 51 when this happened.
Yes.
So many people think, if you haven't found your purpose by the age of 30, then you're over it. You're just a mom, or then you're just a grandma.
Absolutely.
And then that's it.
Yeah, and I don't even have an English O-level or anything. So if I can write a book, anyone could do that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just so powerful that a mom of three has been able to go through these things, discover, like it's a journey of self-discovery, and really open yourself up and be so vulnerable with three girls looking at you. And I bet they are so proud of you. Like, look at their mum, look at my mum go, look what an absolute boss babe she is now, just sharing those things with us. A question I always like to ask every guest is, what advice would you give to your younger self? If you could go back now and look at her, what would you say to her?
Well, I don't really like to have any regrets. I used to think, if I had only stopped denying it when I was in therapy, I could have saved a lot of money, saved all those years. But you do the journey that you do, so I can't have regrets. But what I would do, I would go back and tell her it wasn't her fault. Yeah. Because for years she held on to guilt and fear and shame, inappropriate shame. It was never my shame. And just the feeling of being guilty, that it was my fault, I would try to eradicate that.
Yeah. And what advice would you give to people, let's say they feel trauma, they haven't spoken out to anybody yet. Where do they go? What do they do right now?
Yeah, I would say it's never too late to find your voice. It's never too late to find someone to listen. Be careful who you find. Trust the person that you tell your story to. I've been incredibly lucky. I've been interviewed by some wonderful people. One of them was Sir Trevor MacDonald for BBC Radio 4, which is, no offence to you, it was pretty fabulous. And after the show, my friend told me that her aunt had been listening. She was 81. And to cut a very long story short, she told her niece that she also had been raped as a young girl, and she hadn't told anyone, and she ended 64 years of her silence. So courage really is contagious. I got my courage from somebody else, and I hope that I can pay that forward. But I just want people to know that there's always hope. Pain does end eventually. Hold on, pain ends. But find someone to speak to. And if you can't find someone, stop denying your story, stop minimizing it, stop making it out it was less than it was. Tell yourself your story, write your story down. But yeah, it's never too late to go out and get help or to find your voice.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this. Just words of wisdom, honesty, vulnerability. I feel like I've taken so much away, and I know that our audience who tune in to listen to inspiring stories will be like, there is nothing that I can't speak about. There is nothing that I can't share. Speak, talk, open is the way forward. It is the way to calmness, happiness, and just, it's okay.
Yeah, I really do believe that it's not about what happens to us. It is important, but it's what we do with what happened to us. That's what really matters. and we can all choose how we respond.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm in the show notes. If anybody does want to get hold of you, then we will have all of the information on how people can get in contact with you, how people can get hold of your book. I know that you're not doing your podcast anymore, but that they can contact you and reach out to you on Instagram. It's been a pleasure, and I'm sure we'll be speaking again very soon.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Of
Really
course.
loved it.
Thank you so much.